So the question is, are Washington state luxury homeowners starting to leave this state en masse and move to other states with more favorable taxation? Well, if you've been following Senate Bill 6346 with me or otherwise, then you are probably wondering if the high net worth exodus has already begun. And you would be right to wonder, because if this bill is actually passed, the financial landscape of Washington state is going to change forever. And trust me when I say that the wealthy are always 2 steps ahead of everyone else on planning for the future. Well, I am real estate broker Leah Courage. I am a Washington real estate advisor. And if you've watched my other videos, then you know at this point that I am a realist and I am here to educate you and tell you the truths that other real estate agents just won't. And today I am exposing the luxury flight, because the question remains, is everyone actually leaving, or is there a way to stay and protect your wealth in Washington? Well, by the end of this video, I promise you will understand the interplay between the new Millionaires Tax, as they're calling it, and everyone's property value, not just the ultra wealthy, and what it will mean for you if tech leaders and entrepreneurs and massive corporations all decide to leave the beautiful evergreen state. And I will also be throwing in my luxury exit checklist so that if you plan on moving, you know how to move smartly and not emotionally. So let's dive in. So naturally, we have to start with the 9.9% shockwave that is currently rattling the very expensive triple-paned windows of the Eastside tech corridor. It's the impending Washington state income tax. So Senate Bill 6346 isn't just a headline, my friends. It is a structural shift in how wealth is viewed in Washington state. So if you look at a map of the greater Seattle area, specifically the zip codes of 98039 and 98040, you are looking at the highest concentration of specialized tech wealth in the entirety of the United States. So for years, the trade-off for our high cost of living was the absence of a state income tax. That was the moat that protected Washington from losing talent to California. But with the passage of this new tax on high earners, that moat has just evaporated. So this isn't just about a paycheck, it's about the liquidity event. So if you are a founder at a South Lake Union AI startup, or if you're an executive, say at Microsoft, with a massive vest of RSUs coming due, then the state just became your most expensive silent partner. What most people don't realize is that this tax interacts with your home equity in a very visceral way. So when the high earner tax was introduced in early 2026, we saw an immediate cooling in the ultra luxury segment, which is homes priced over $5 million. And why? Because the buyers who can actually afford these homes are the exact people that are being targeted by this legislation. So if a buyer is looking at a $10 million waterfront property, say in Hunts Point, they are now calculating that additional 9.9% haircut on their annual earnings. That reduces their purchasing power, which eventually forces sellers to lower their expectations. It is a domino effect where the state's hunger for revenue effectively devalues the highest tier of our real estate market. But here's another reality that we need to focus on. The exodus that we are starting to see actually started a few years ago. We aren't just talking about a handful of disgruntled retirees, by the way. We are seeing a targeted migration of our state's most mobile and successful residents who saw the writing on the wall back in 2022 when the initial capital gains tax was first debated. What began as a quiet trickle of tech executives that were moving to, say, Incline Village or to Summerlin has actually turned into a super steady stream of homeowners in Bellevue and Sammamish who are no longer willing to wait for the next emergency clause to devalue their life's work. So they've realized that by being locked in to a 3% mortgage doesn't matter if the state is clawing back 10% of your earnings every single year that you choose to stay. So when high net worth individuals leave, they don't just take their tax dollars, they actually take their investment capital and their job creating potential and the potential buyer demand out of our luxury ecosystem. So we are watching what I believe is the beginning of a hollowing out of the very talent pool that literally built the Puget Sound, leaving those who remain to pick up an ever-increasing share of the bill. So the psychological shift is even more profound, by the way, than the mathematical one. We are literally having conversations with families right now in Bellevue who have lived here in this area for 30 or more years, and they feel like the state is actively rooting against their success. They feel like the quote emergency clause that was used to push these taxes through was a total betrayal of the democratic process. And in my opinion, they're not wrong. You can watch my other videos if you want to understand what's going on with the income tax and understand why they feel like that. So when you feel like the rules can be changed, by the way, overnight without a vote, you stop investing in your property. You stop the massive kitchen remodel and you stop the professional landscaping and you start looking at Zillow listings in Scottsdale and in Austin. This is the wealth leak that agents in my industry are just too darn scared to talk about because they don't want to sound too political. But as a realist, I have to tell you that capital goes where it is welcomed and stays where it is well treated. And right now in Washington, luxury capital feels like it's being hunted. So now before we go any deeper into the mansion tax trap and the 183-day residency rule, I need to stop and give you some very direct advice. If you are watching this and you are realizing that your luxury home is starting to feel a lot more like a liability than an asset, or if you're already planning on making a move in the next 6 months to protect your family and to protect your equity, then you need to contact us. Go ahead and pick up the phone and call or text the number in the description of this video. My team and I are not just experts in the King and Snohomish County luxury markets. We've actually built a world-class trusted partner program. So whether you're looking at the 0% tax havens of Florida or Texas or Tennessee, or even if you're looking to move internationally to protect your portfolio, we have a vetted network of totally top-tier agents who understand the level of service and discretion that you expect and that we expect for our clients. And we don't just hand you off to a random name in a database. We actually pair you with the specialist who handles high net worth relocations with the same forensic level of detail that we use here. So please let us be your global real estate advisors and help you move your equity to a place where it is actually respected. All right, so let's now talk about the graduated real estate excise tax, otherwise known as the REET, because this is the hidden mansion tax that many sellers don't calculate or fully appreciate until they see that preliminary settlement statement from the escrow company. So in Washington, we don't have a flat tax on home sales. We have a tiered system that progressively gets more aggressive as the price goes up. Big shocker there. For the portion of your sale price over roughly $3.4 million, the state takes 3%. And if you're selling a $6 million home, say in Mercer Island, that, my friends, is a massive check that you're writing to Olympia just for the privilege of leaving. So when you compare that to a state like, say, Texas, where there is no state level excise tax on real estate transfers, the math is enough to make you nauseous, quite frankly. So you're literally paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more to exit a Washington property than you would almost anywhere else in the country. So this creates what I call an inventory anchor. Many luxury owners actually want to leave, but they look at the cost of the REIT combined with the loss of their 3% mortgage rate, and they naturally feel a little bit locked in. But here is the value bomb that many wealthy property owners across the state are currently considering, and that is that the cost of staying could be much higher than the cost of leaving. If the luxury market in the Puget Sound continues to soften because the buyer pool is shrinking due to the income tax, then your $5 million home today might be a $4.5 million home next year. So you're essentially paying a delay tax by staying in a declining segment. We are, not kidding here, actually seeing savvy sellers in places like Sammamish and Issaquah who are choosing to take the excise tax hit right now because they recognize that being the first one out of a building that's catching on fire is always better than being the last one that's caught in the stairwell. So I also want to touch on the lock-in effect 2.0. So we've all heard about how high interest rates have actually kept inventory low across the board, within reason. But in the luxury space, it's different. These aren't people who are struggling to make a payment. These are people who value efficiency. If they can't justify the carry cost of a Washington home versus the tax savings of a Florida home, they will move. We're starting to see shadow inventory building up. And that's homes that aren't officially on the market yet, but the owners have already bought their replacement property in a zero tax state. They're waiting for the spring peak in order to list their property here, but when everybody has the same idea at the same time, we very well could see a supply spike that the current buyer pool cannot absorb. So this is why timing the market is less important than beating the crowd. So now we need to discuss the Connecticut ghost and how it is haunting the halls of the Washington State Legislature. I've talked about it in other videos, but honestly, it's important enough that I'm going to repeat it back right here. So back in the early 90s, Connecticut was a wealth magnet for New York City executives because it had no income tax. When they finally implemented one to solve a budget crisis, the state thought that they could just tax their way to a surplus. Instead, the ultra wealthy, people who owned companies like General Electric, for example, simply left. And that tax base, as you can imagine, eroded so quickly that the government had to start raising taxes on the middle class just to keep the lights on. And guess what, folks? We are seeing the exact same playbook being opened in Olympia. So when you see a Millionaire's Tax with an emergency clause on it, you're seeing the first chapter of a story that ends with higher property taxes for you and for everybody who stays behind. If the top 1% of taxpayers in Washington provide a massive chunk of the state's revenue and say simply 10% of those people leave, who do you think is going to pay the difference? It will be the homeowners in neighborhoods like Shoreline, Edmonds, Anacortes, Blaine, Renton. You get my point. So the hard truth that I guarantee your agent won't tell you is that the government actually wants your property tax valuation to stay high, even if the market is cooling. They need those high assessments to justify the property tax levies that fund this state's ever-growing budget. This is why you'll see the county assessor's value keep climbing even as your real-world market value starts to plateau. It is a mathematical mirage. They want you to feel rich on paper so that you don't complain about the taxes that you are paying in penalty. But you can't pay your mortgage with your paper gains. You can only pay it with cash flow, and the new 9.9% tax is a direct hit to that cash flow. So you have to stop looking at your luxury home as a dream, and you need to start looking at it for what it actually is, which is a tax liable asset. And if the liability is growing faster than the utility of the home, it is time, my friends, to reassess your position. So I'm also seeing a fascinating arbitrage window for people who want the Washington lifestyle, but without the Washington tax bill. So for example, look at the southern border of our state, specifically in Camas and Washougal. These areas are actually exploding because they offer a strategic loophole that I may or may not have mentioned in other videos as well. You live in Washington with 0% income tax, assuming you stay below the millionaire threshold for now, and you can drive 10 minutes across the bridge into Oregon and do all of your shopping with 0% sales tax. And yes, I'm fully aware that this is technically against the rules, but I dare you to tell people living in Washington to not use this strategy in order to save money these days. So this border arbitrage is actually a hyperlocal nuance that keeps values high in Clark County while the King County luxury market is struggling. And it proves that buyers are actually becoming tax sensitive in a way that we haven't seen in 30 years. So if you aren't factoring in the tax map into your real estate strategy, then you are leaving money on the table. So for those of you in the Eastside, we have to talk about the tech talent drift that's happening. So this is a very big deal. Microsoft President Brad Smith and several other tech leaders have already warned that aggressive taxation will lead definitively to a reconsideration of where jobs are placed. And in plain English, friends, that means that they are planning on moving jobs, and not just the new ones that they're creating, but existing jobs in Washington state. We're already seeing high-paying roles that are being shifted to Vancouver, BC, or to the growing tech hubs in the Southeast, like Atlanta. Real estate values in the Puget Sound are entirely dependent on high-paying jobs. If the talent leaves, then the luxury buyer disappears. It doesn't happen overnight, though. It is a slow drain. It's a series of quiet exits. It's the founder who decides to open their next office in Miami instead of Bellevue. So when that happens, the demand for a $20 million waterfront home on Lake Washington doesn't just drop, it can vanish altogether. And trust me, you don't want to be holding a massive illiquid asset when the music stops. So now let's talk about the 183-day rule and why it is the most important number in your life if you are planning an exit from Washington state. To stop paying Washington's new taxes, you have to prove that you are no longer a resident. So this state is highly aggressive about it. They will look at your cell phone pings. They will look at your credit card swipes, and they will even look at where you're getting your hair cut to prove that you spend more than half the year in Washington. And most people think that they can just say, buy a condo in Vegas and call it a day. But trust me, the Department of Revenue will come. They will hunt you down if you aren't careful. This is exactly why my luxury exit checklist is so vital. If you plan on going, but you still want to maintain a significant amount of your year in Washington, then you need a clean break. And you need a realist strategy that accounts for the fact that the state does not want to let go of your tax dollars. So the psychological toll of the luxury flight, by the way, is creating kind of a weird vibe in our most exclusive neighborhoods. We're seeing more and more pocket listings than we ever have before. So these are homes that are for sale, but the owners don't want to sign in the yard. They don't want their neighbors knowing that they're leaving, especially when they're ultra wealthy. Privacy becomes key. They're quietly testing the waters, and they're hoping for a global buyer to swoop in and take the property off their hands before the next legislative session starts. So this secret inventory that we have is a clear sign of a market in transition. And if you're a buyer, it's definitely an opportunity. But if you're a seller, it's a warning that your competition is already making moves behind the scenes. And let me tell you, you really need to have an agent who knows how to navigate the hidden market and knows how to find buyers who are still willing to invest in Washington. So now I want to speak directly to the founders and the early employees who aren't sitting on qualified small business stock or QSBS. The state's move to decouple from federal tax protections for your stock is a direct hit to your retirement. Federally, you might owe 0% on your first $10 million in gains, but Washington wants their pound of flesh. This makes your exit price 10% higher just to break even in Washington. So if you're at a stage where your company is approaching, say, an IPO or an acquisition, then you need to be talking to me or another very savvy real estate broker, not today, but yesterday, because we can look at real estate swap strategies that actually allow you to move your primary residence and protect that gain before the tax trap snaps shut. Because, and I know you know this as well, this isn't just about real estate. It's actually about your entire financial legacy at this point. So we also have to address the stigmatized property of a different kind. It is the tax-stigmatized neighborhood. So as more wealthy individuals leave certain municipalities, the local governments often react by raising local property taxes or impact fees just to compensate for that lost revenue. So this creates a death spiral for property values. We saw this in parts of California where the luxury enclaves that were once the absolute crown jewels of the state became symbols of government overreach. We're watching levy rates in certain King County school districts, by the way, very closely right now, because if you see a district where the homeowners are overwhelmingly voting no on new bonds, it's a sign that the tax fatigue has started to reach a breaking point. And you don't want to be in a neighborhood where the residents are at war with the school board over their tax bills. So as we wrap up the core of the breakdown, remember that Washington is still truly a beautiful state. It's a beautiful place to live. And for many, the quality of life 100% justifies the cost of living here. But being a realist means that you don't ignore the math. You don't ignore the emergency clause. You don't ignore the fact that the Millionaire Tax is just the beginning of a broader shift in our state's fiscal policy. You, my friends, no matter what your income is, have to be the CEO of your own household, and you have to decide if the paper wealth that you have in your home is really worth the real world liability that it's rapidly becoming. And if you decide that it's time to diversify your equity into other markets, then you really need a partner who understands the high altitude view of the national landscape. So now, as promised, let's get into the bonus section and your luxury exit checklist if you're planning on leaving Washington state. So if you are taking your residency to a tax haven state, then you have to do these 5 things to protect yourself from an audit. First, you must change your domicile by filing an official declaration of domicile in your new state. Second, you must update your voter registration and actually vote in your new district. The state uses voter rolls as a primary evidence of residency. Know that. Third, you must switch your driver's license and vehicle registration within the first 30 days. Fourth, you must move your, quote, near and dear items. And this means your family photos, your heirlooms, and your pets. And don't forget your kids. If the state sees, by the way, that your expensive art collection is still in your Medina home, then they're going to argue that you haven't truly left. And fifth, you must limit your Washington days to significantly less than 183. I tell my clients to aim for 150 days or less just to be safe. So these steps seem simple, but trust me, the Department of Revenue is looking for any excuse to keep you on the hook for that 9.9%. And they will look, like I said earlier, at your gym memberships, they'll look at your dental appointments, and they will even look at where you're picking up your dry cleaning. So you have to be meticulous. You have to be disciplined. And most importantly, you have to have a home in your new state that is commensurate with your lifestyle right now in Washington. So if you sell a $5 million home in Bellevue and you buy a $250,000 condo in Florida, then the state is going to claim that it's a sham residency. So you need to move your lifestyle and not just your address. So in conclusion, my friends, Washington state is changing. And believe me, the wealthy are taking note and they are taking action. We're moving past the era of unlimited growth into an era of aggressive extraction. The state legislature is looking at your home equity and your high earning potential as a primary source of their revenue to fix their sloppy budget shortfalls. It makes me so mad. But whether you choose to stay and fight for the moat in your neighborhoods like Medina or Mercer Island, or if you decide that 9.9% marriage penalty, watch our other videos on Senate Bill 6346 to learn about that. If that marriage penalty is going to be the final signal to move your capital to a more safe harbor, you cannot afford to be passive, no matter what. Passive homeowners in this climate are the ones who end up subsidizing the exit for those who are smart enough to move first. I'm your real estate realist here, and the realist path forward is about data, it's about timing, and it's also about having an advisor who isn't afraid to tell you when the math simply no longer makes sense. And my goal for you and for all of my clients is to make sure that you and they are the ones making the decision for your family's future and not a group of lawmakers in Olympia who have never had to manage a balance sheet like yours. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope that this forensic look at the Washington luxury market has been helpful for you and for your family. And if you found this video valuable, please hit that subscribe button and share this with your neighbors who are having these same conversations behind closed doors. Right now, we are in a period of unprecedented change in Washington. And guess what? You need a real estate advisor who isn't afraid to tell you the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Actually, I take it back, especially when the truth is uncomfortable. I am Leah Courage, and I look forward to helping you protect your equity and your legacy, whether that's right here in Washington State or whether it's in your next destination. So go ahead and pick up the phone and call us, and let's get your strategy started today. So thank you again so much for watching. Keep exploring out there, and I'll see you in the next video.